moving on, our author tonight, I'm absolutely delighted to have Alison with us. I must say that Alison was on our wish list of author events when we've opened about 4 years ago. So it's taken us a while. Alison is very busy. She is, these days, an international historic author. And I believe you've just come back from touring America, so incredibly busy. So I give you, ladies and gentlemen, Alison Weir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening. Can you hear me at the back? That's great. It's a great pleasure and a privilege to be here. Very much looking forward to this evening. She was a famous adulteress, and she occupies a unique place in British history, the subject of great scandal and notoriety, who was denigrated as an abominable enchantress. She was the mistress and friend of a royal prince for more than a quarter of a century, their affair having begun soon after he married a desirable young bride. Years later, after his wife had died and he married her, controversy and criticism surrounded their union, for she was thought to be far below him in status, morally unacceptable and highly unsuitable in nearly every way. Before long, however, her exceptional qualities won her acceptance and respect. Sounds familiar? Indeed it does, but it's not about Charles Diana. It's the story of a fascinating woman who lived more than 600 years ago, the ancestress of our present monarch, and a lady who's been so neglected by historians that until recently no one wrote a proper full-length biography of her. Instead, she's been known to us largely through the pages of a popular romantic novel. That woman was Katherine Swynford, and she was one of the most important female figures of the late 14th century. Her partner in adultery, and later her husband, was John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster, the fourth son of King Edward III, and one of the most powerful and celebrated figures of late medieval England. Theirs is a love story, one of the greatest and most remarkable stories in the Middle Ages in England. It's also the extraordinary tale of an exceptional woman. Now, I have to say that Katherine Swynford's story first captured my imagination 4 decades ago when I first read Anya Seton's novel, Catherine. And that made a tremendous impact on me as an adolescent. And I have to say, I still enjoy reading that book today. It's still one of my favourite historical novels. And I know I'm not alone, because in 2003 it came 95th in the top 100 for the BBC's The Big Read. So it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that this book's been at the back of my mind for about 40 years. But even when I became a published author in the late 80s, no publisher would have contemplated commissioning a book on such a relatively obscure woman. And that remained the situation until the late 90s, early 2000s, with an explosion of interest in all things historical. And it's at that point that I seized my moment and suggested I write a biography of John of Gaunt to my publishers. Well, my British publishers bought this, they thought this was a great idea. The Americans took 18 months to be convinced, and it wasn't until my American editor came over and had lunch with me, and she said, well, tell me again why you want to write this book. I sent in enough submissions, and I went over the story again, and she said, why don't you do a biography of Katherine Swynford? I thought, yes, that's really what I wanted to do, and so that's how this book came into being. Now, I think that Katherine deserves a biography for many reasons. First and foremost, she was romantically linked to John of Gaunt, and their passionate and ultimately poignant love affair is both astonishing and moving. Katherine was beautiful, desirable, enigmatic and intriguing, and some of her contemporaries regarded her as dangerous also. Her existence was played out against the vivid backdrop of court life at the height of the age of chivalry, and she knew most of the great figures of the age. The poet Geoffrey Chaucer, author of the Canterbury Tales, was her brother-in-law. She lived through the 100 Years' War, the Black Death, and the Peasants' Revolt. She knew passion, loss, adversity, and heartbreak, and she survived them all triumphantly. Her story gives us unique insights into the life of a medieval woman. But Katherine was unusual. She did not conform to many of the conventional norms expected of women in that age, and in several respects, her story has relevance for us today.